The evening of day 2 begins right after the morning of day 1. Because remember, the days go evening and morning, evening and morning, evening and morning. So the evening of day 2 begins after the morning of day 1. And Elohim speaks. Remember, Elohim is the only name for the divinity being used in chapter 1. Elohim speaks, and he says, "Let there be a rakir between the waters." Now you may ask, what is a rakir? And you will not find a consistent translation of this word throughout the history of translation work. But it's not a problem word. It's not a rare word. It occurs in multiple locations, different books of the Bible, sometimes 2 or 3 times in a single book. And it comes from the verb rakar, meaning to work metal with hammer or mallet, to pound out a sheet of soft metal. It doesn't work real well with hard metals, like steel or iron, but it works very well with soft metals like gold or silver or copper. And a rakir, the thing that Elohim has decided to make, is an object of hammered metal. It would be a piece of jewelry, a piece of armored clothing. It would be something that had been hammered into shape. The Greek translation took us down the wrong path by rendering it as stereoma, something solid, emphasizing the solidity of God's work. But all God's works are solid, unless he's making air or water. He is making solid, so something solid doesn't tell you much. And it kind of distracts us from the fact that this kind of metalwork is done with the soft metals and not with the hard metals. So it's leading us, it's a correct translation, but it is a little misleading. The Latin then followed it with firmamentum, something firm, and then that became le firmament in French, the firmament in English, el firmamento in Spanish, il firmamento in Italian, and o firmamento in Portuguese. And most of these people not even thinking about the basic meaning of the word anymore, just thinking about the sky overhead when they hear firmament. In recent times, the shortcomings of those traditional translations have been recognized by translators who have come up with architectural terms to describe the shape of what God is creating. Not the substance of it, but the shape of it. Ronald Knox was one of the first in his great translation into English from the Latin, and he produced the term vault, which was picked up by the Jerusalem Bible, English translation, and the New Jerusalem Bible, the sequel to the Jerusalem Bible. But vault is a little misleading in its own way because a vaulted ceiling has ridges, and the vault is one of those ridges. Better is what the Americans came up with in the New American Bible, use of the term dome. Now we're getting at the actual shape. But the first great dome does not appear in architecture until 126 AD, when the Emperor Hadrian built the Pantheon to all the gods in Rome. One giant piece of cement forming a dome with a hole in the center of it. So the Pantheon was built hundreds of years after the account in Genesis was written. So for us to push back our concept of domed architecture to what was in the mind of the Hebrew author is anachronistic. It means it is not of his time. So dome gets the right shape, but it's switching over into structural architecture instead of staying with the image of metalworking, which is the essence of the root. Now, there are dome shapes in small craftsmanship too. You have bowls that are made out of hammered out metal. And if the bowl points up, it can be used as a dish for eating. And if the bowl points down, it can be placed over the head and used as a helmet. As a matter of fact, through a miracle of historical accidents, we possess a helmet that was made 4,600 years ago, worn by a king of Ur and Kish, a Sumerian king by the name of Mes-Kalam-Dug. This is called the gold helmet of Mes-Kalam-Dug, but it's actually 62.5% silver with enough gold to add a golden hue to it. There was probably less gold to go around than silver, so they made an alloy called electrum. And usually, if more than 50% of an alloy item it belongs to a given metal, then it is called that thing. So this should be called the silver helmet. This helmet would not have been of any use at all on the battlefield, because soft metal like this could be just cleaved in two by a sword, even a dull one. No, this was a ceremonial helmet, a dress uniform to be worn by the king during parades, and it was meant to display the glory of the king. So in my translation of day 2, I use the term helmet, a small item of dome shape worn over the head for the glory and not just for the protection, because it is a piece of fine art. Elohim said, "Let there be a helmet between the waters for the parting of waters from waters." Elohim made the helmet. He parted water under the helmet from water over the helmet. It happened that way. Elohim called the helmet the sky. It was evening, it was morning of day 2. And soon there will be the evening of day 3. See you then.